Hi, this is Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz from Israel 365. I'm in the Golan. I'm speaking to my dear friend David Nekrutman. Of course, we're going to be talking a little bit later about what we see in the unfolding in the war in Israel. But first, I'd like to talk about an amazing initiative. My friend David. David is he always wants to find a solution. He's I'm a bit of a nihilist, a bit of I have problems. David is always looking for solutions, always looking to fix things. God bless him. So David, David, what's this initiative you're working on for the
So
war?
first of all, Adam, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. It's Motzei Shabbat. It's 14 days into the war, so we should remind our listeners on the greatest day of joy, where we source all our joy for the rest of the year, which is Shmini Atzeret. In Leviticus chapter 23, we have the outline of all the biblical holidays, the day of Rosh Hashanah, the New Year, Day of Atonement, the Feast of Tabernacles, and then there's an extra day called the eighth day, Shmini Atzeret, which later on developed into the holiday of Simchat Torah, which is rejoicing of God's word by dancing with God's word, dancing with the Torah scrolls. We're just in this infusion of joy on steroids, of holiness joy. And on that day, it's going to turn out to be a day of judgment, where right now over 1,400 have been murdered, thousands have been injured. Right now, I think that the number is 210, as reported of the news tonight, of who are being held hostage in Gaza, and there were two Americans released today. So you and I have in our different roles, you in your reporting for Israel 365 and letting people know what's going on the ground, me working with the humanitarian efforts with the Isaiah projects and evacuating almost 50 families from Moshav Mish'en, which is a community 6 miles away from Gaza that was bombarded with missiles. We were helping to evacuate them to Jerusalem, and then providing flashlights and mattresses and battery pack chargers and just different things that we were involved in throughout the 2 weeks, delivering food to Sderot for the families there, all in partnership with Jews and Christians. So Bridges for Peace and Robbie Coleman from Zion's Bridge, and our great friend Jonathan Feldstein from Genesis 123 Foundation. And there have been churches all over the United States, Dripping Springs Methodist Church, for example, Pastor Adam Thornton and Dalton Cross Point, Pastor Stan and April Lester, Gary Connie Bachman from Zion's Gate International. I think what I've been able to do in the last 2 weeks is actually bridge the two faith organizations together to do a lot of work on the ground. And in that process, this is the reason why we're coming here today, is we came up with this idea to fast forward a Sabbath movement within the Christian world. And since right now, Israel needs our support more than ever, because a lot of people are condemning us for our attempt to go into Gaza and get rid of Hamas. I'm all about free Palestine, but free Palestine from Hamas. We don't need terrorists running this piece of land in the Holy Land called Gaza. So in unity, in solidarity with Israel, we came up with this idea that we should light 2 Shabbat candles, one for Israel and one for the country of the person who's lighting it from. And they should take a picture of it, post it on social media, and simply say, Israel, we stand with you from our country. Insert the country. And so far, since the beginning of our cycle of reading the weekly Torah portion, this is taking place every Shabbat. But this Shabbat coming up is going to be the most famous chapter and verse for all who are Christians who support Israel. And that's Genesis chapter 12, verse 3. I will bless you who will bless thee. Right? So it's coming up in our annual cycle right now of reading that chapter as well as other chapters, but it begins with chapter 12. And I figured for the I will bless you, we should have hundreds of thousands of Christians around the world lighting this Shabbat coming up, this Friday evening, with a picture saying, I stand with Israel, with that verse of Genesis chapter 12, verse 30.
If I can respond to that and react to it, first of all, I want to say I can almost guarantee right now that I'm not going to get through this broadcast without crying. I'm absolutely going to cry, probably several times. Jordan Peterson he gave a lecture once, and he was asking his students, he stands in front of the class of students, he says, how many of you think that if you were alive in the days of the Nazis before World War II, you would have stood up to the Nazis? And, a bunch of students raised their hands. He said, none of you. None of you. And I'm horrified to see that we're experiencing that now. There's still rockets falling in Israel in the south as well as the north. I mean, right now there are rockets. There are people. They evacuated Kiryat Shmona, which is a huge city. It's not huge, but it's the biggest city up north. Kiryat Shmona. They evacuated it. So anyone who's saying ceasefire now, well, are they really calling for ceasefire, or are they just calling for Jews to stop shooting back? Which we know where that heads. We know where that headed in history. We know where that headed 2 weeks ago. These people are calling for the death of Jews. They're saying it in a way that maybe they don't feel so disgusting, but what they're saying is disgusting. And there's a saying in Hasidut, a little light pushes away a lot of darkness. And it really does. Sometimes it just takes the voice of a child to say, hey, this isn't okay. And then all of a sudden the adults wake up. And when I think about what it would mean to have, Shabbos candles displayed, you have a few people saying, not on my watch, not on my watch. We've been there in history. We've seen this before. What happens when the world cheers on the murder of Jews? And we're the canaries in the coal mine. We're the first ones to go. And after that, they'll come for anyone who believes in the Bible, who believes that you can't just murder who you want. So to display a tiny light and say, not on my watch. I am with the nation of Israel. I am blessing them. You can't touch me because I'm being blessed back. I think it's huge. It's not just symbolic. I think this is a practical, it will have effects. You have these people screaming in groups. Okay, but are they really the majority, or are they just really loud? So I think a little bit of light would have a huge impact, which is why I think what you're doing is going to have a huge impact. It's really amazing.
Eliyahu, from your lips to God's ears, for
Amen.
many people hearing this right now, may it happen. And that's what we want. But again, it's all part, we've talked about this in the past, that we're looking for a Shabbat for the nations in partnership with the nations as a fulfillment of Isaiah 66:23, from new moon to new moon, from Sabbath to Sabbath, all will worship with me. Well, usually Sabbath is about the past, right? It's about what has happened in the beginning of creation, acknowledging God the creator, acknowledging that there is a 7-day week, which is, not every ancient civilization had 7 days in the week. Some had 13, some had 6, some had 10. The world being on a 7-day week is quite phenomenal and miraculous, but we're on it. But the thing is that there is a redemptive Sabbath that Isaiah speaks about. And maybe this is maybe a light within everything that's happening right now, that people will recognize that now when I'm lighting the Sabbath candle, it's not only what God did for us from the beginning, but it's leading us to the future redemption. And amazing. I do this in partnership with what I know is a fact of God, that you and I are in Israel. You're up in the Golan. I'm here in the middle of the country in Netanya. We are living, breathing witnesses to the world that God is a covenantal God. He keeps his word. And we have returned after 2,000 years. And we're standing not as people on the side thinking that redemption is just a Jewish VIP club, but redemption means the world. And we do this in partnership with those sincere Christians around the world, that remnant who say, we are with you. And a way to demonstrate that is lighting 2 candles, especially for Genesis chapter 12, verse 3, that's happening this coming Friday night. I think it amplifies what this is all about.
Yeah, it's actually pretty amazing what you're saying. And you answered a question that I've always had, which was we say 2 kiddushes. We bless on the wine twice on Shabbos, and once is for creation. God created the world and he rested on the Sabbath. And the other is for the exiting of Egypt. And I'm always like, what's the connection between the Sabbath and the exiting of Egypt? The exiting of Egypt was the template for God keeping his promise to redeem, the redemption. He promised. And it was 400 years. And he promised, I'll be there for you. I'll take you out. And he kept his promise. And that's what the end was, the end of slavery, the beginning of redemption. So yes, we have 2 candles for those 2 things. One is the creation of the world. And especially in these incredibly dark times, we have to remember that the God who created the world, he keeps his promise. And the end is known. It's redemption. It's Mashiach. It's Geula. And that's what the second candle of Shabbos is. So you light the both candles, you say, like you said in the past, Hashem created the world. And then there's the future, and he keeps his promise, and we know it's going to happen.
Right. I would even go further than that, because what is that Exodus really about? Yes, we talk about this Exodus moment because most of our holidays is on the biblical side of things. Leviticus chapter 23 is somehow related to that redemptive moment, but we can never forget that it was not only the biological descendants of Jacob being redeemed from Egypt. The reason why God did what he did in Egypt with all the plagues and all the miracles that took place is that the Egyptians would see who the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was all about, that their pagan gods is in no comparison to the real God of the world. And in Exodus chapter 12, verse 38, we have this great mixed multitude that saw the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and went out with the biological descendants of Jacob. These are people who are part of the royal house of Egypt. They were slaves themselves. Some intermarried within the families, the biological descendants of Jacob. But it was not just a small group. It was a big, gigantic group, a great mixed multitude that went out. And that, for me, is a sign of what will eventually be in the Isaiah vision of this redemptive Sabbath that we're all supposed to be participating in.
Right. And that's another thing that's really surprising about this whole thing that's happening to us now. They had this, I don't know if people are aware of it, but Rashida Tlaib, and it sounds horrible to talk about politics, but politics are people making a choice. Rashida Tlaib, she gave this speech and she repeated the lie about Israel bombing the hospital. And right after that, dare I say, there was an insurrection where a bunch of people went into a federal building next to the Capitol building, not the actual Capitol building, took it over. Hundreds of people went in. There was graffiti on the walls. They did do damage to the building, and they suspended the congressional proceedings. And you know who these people were? They were Jews for Palestine. They were Jews for Palestine, which is painful to say. And the crazy thing is, my biggest friends, the people I reach out to for hope, who give me the most hope right now, these are the people giving me hope, are the Christians. Because I sure didn't expect it, you know? And it really gives me hope. It gives me hope for the present. It gives me hope for the future, that if these people from out of nowhere, in a way that's actually runs counter to history, they're with us really in beautiful, loving ways. There's hope. There's hope. So that's why I'm really excited. I'd love to, if I could fly over the U.S. and see all the candles, see all the Shabbat candles. That would
Not only the US, I got people from all over the world. I mean, I'm
really.
working with Brit Lode. I mean, this is how it started. She said, "Can we do
Preach is great.
something of an initiative?" Brit is amazing.
She is
So
amazing.
could we do this together? And Yehuda Glick came aboard, and Christine Darg came aboard just this
Wow.
past Friday. So we have
Wow.
it's starting to build a momentum, but that the momentum can only happen when other people hear the idea and be able to do it on their own. It's not about credit to the Isaiah projects or to Brit or to anybody. We just want 2 candles to be lit
Duke.
on Friday night. That's it. There's no appeal whatsoever. It's not about going ahead and sewing into an emergency relief fund or anything like that. Just light 2 candles.
If you
That,
want to say a blessing, say, whenever
and
I
I would
heard,
even go further. I think you also shared this photo. You know this on Thursday, the Tel Aviv Museum of Art
yes.
set this table of it's called the empty chair, the empty Shabbat table. Now it hit me like a ton of bricks because
Mm,
every week I put a picture on my Facebook about my empty Shabbat table, knowing full well that my family and friends and even Christian pastors have been at my Shabbat table in Netanya, and I know it will be full. I just put it there so people could see, and I say Shabbat Shalom from our family to yours. And to see this picture on Friday morning of the exhibit, it just hit me like a ton of bricks because each seat was representing a hostage that will not be attending a Shabbat table. Now, understand that not all the hostages are Jewish. There are Jews and non-Jews being held hostage. And what I think was beautiful, what the museum did was everyone is invited to God's Shabbat table, and somehow they're going to be missed for that Shabbat. And it was just a powerful message, and it spoke to what we do all the time is just bridging everyone to come together for the sake of God. So I thought I used that as a way to say not only light the candle, but also find out about the life of a hostage and
mm.
share that story at the Shabbat table,
I can't,
so they are not forgotten.
I can't imagine what it must be like to be a family and have your Shabbat knowing that your loved one can't be there because they're a hostage. It's, Shabbat is all about family, blessing your children, being with your wife and seeing her across the table and singing Eshet Chayil to her about how she's an amazing wife and how that's an important part of your life. And to all of a sudden have that taken away, I just can't imagine it. I can't imagine it. So yeah.
So that's the initiative. That's the
That's the
initiative. Don't
initiative.
cry right now, Adam. We need to
Okay.
continue with this podcast.
This is
This is
so
about
hard.
motivation. It's chizuk. It's motivation that there are people out there that are really concerned about us, even though they can't be physically here.
So
Uh,
I want to tell you, we were talking about Pesach. We all know Pesach literally means the mouth that speaks. And we're living in a generation where speech and communication is the key. It's, I think, the thing that's characterizing this era. And yet at the same time, there is no freedom of speech. I just got off the phone with a couple friends from America, and the level of what they're being told, the level of bad communication is stunning. They're Jewish and they don't know what's happening in Israel. I said, there are still rockets falling. There's no one talks about that. I'm like, no. And they just abandoned Kiryat Shmona because Hezbollah is shooting rockets at us, and it looks like it's going to go in that direction as well. I'm in the Golan. I hear the F-16s flying over my head, literally nonstop, as long as there's no clouds, no cloud cover. because they're going in to beat down Hezbollah before they come up. There's no freedom of speech. And like Viktor Frankl said in Man's Search for Meaning, there's a lot of things you can't control, but what you can control is how you accept what happens to you. And he went through the Holocaust. He was, I believe, in Auschwitz. He was in a camp. And he said, how do you accept it? If things are bad, don't go down quietly. Open your mouth. I keep urging people, open your mouth in prayer, open your mouth in identifying with Israel. Just don't be silent, which is why I think the Shabbos candles, it's identifying. So yeah, I think there's people need to educate themselves. The lie about Israel bombing the hospital, Rashida Tlaib is still spreading that. Ilhan Omar is still spreading it. There's still being talked. BBC never rescinded it. The fact that they refuse to call Hamas terrorists. Can we please use language? It's horrifying what's happening in the media. So I think that's
well, this ties into the Shabbat concept,
yes.
because you and I know that our liturgy on Sabbath morning includes Psalm 34. And one of the big things that is huge for us is to develop our awe of God, what we call in Hebrew Yirat Hashem. In fact, Solomon, after he writes his book of Kohelet, at the end of that book, at the end, he's saying, Sof Davar, at the end of it all, you're supposed to go ahead and be a person who is in awe of God, to do his directives, to follow his ways. But on Psalm 34, which we recite every Sabbath, so we call it Sabbath Psalms, it says there, come, my children, listen to me, and I will teach you the awe of God. Whoever of you loves life and desires to see many good days, what's the first thing the psalmist is telling us? Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from telling lies. And Adam knows this in Jewish hermeneutics. You really don't need to have redundancy in Scripture. If you have redundancy in Scripture, there's a revelational nugget to excavate from that sacred text. All the text needed to say is just keep your tongue from evil. Why is it emphasizing and your lips from telling lies? Even in poetry is sacred when we deal with the Psalms. There's no reason to be redundant in this, because at the end we know that it is the mouth that has the power for life and death. And you need a 24-hour security system on one's mouth to prevent spreading malicious lies and gossip that's unneeded. And that's exactly what's happening right now among the people who feel that it's okay to support terrorists.
It's okay to lie about the Jews. It's okay to lie.
It's okay to lie. And if you want to be a real person who is in awe of God, I don't like the word fear of God, because I think Yirah here is in the context of awe, like God is awesome. And it takes time to be in awe of God. It's always easy to be in fear of God, but to be in awe and say, wow, like a mountaintop experience with God, and to feel that every day and to be with that emotion, that takes time. But the first ingredient is to make sure you be careful of what comes out of this mouth, because at the end of the day, it is the mouth that decides life and death. I think Adam knows this wonderful story, like the body parts. We're all arguing with one another. Who's the most important part of the body? The heart, the hands, and everyone's arguing, giving their defense. And the mouth opens up and basically says something really wrong in front of a king, and the king decides it's death for this person. And the mouth says, I win. So it is what's happening right now that takes away from the awe of God is evil speech and malicious lies.
Yeah, and it's funny that that's connected to. I remember once when I was in the Army, we're hanging out. You do a lot of hanging out in the Army. I never hung out as much as I did when I was in the Army. And there was this one guy, he was a natural comedian, and he's sitting up there, and imitating the officer and just doing this. He's amazing, natural comedian. And who walks in and is standing right behind him? The officer. I think that guy, he didn't see home for a month. He was like, and we're trying to tell him. No, he just kept going. So, yeah. Even though I think at the end the officer was laughing, but but yeah, it really is. And the fact that I've never expected to see so many lies as I've seen. I remember years ago when I first started seeing what the internet was, I had great hopes. I'm like, wow, this is fantastic. Everyone's got a cell phone in their pocket. You can see everything. There won't be any more lies in the world. Oh my gosh, was I wrong? I have never seen so many lies as I've seen now. And the images are out there. Anyone who says, oh, Israel, they're horrible. I'm like, can we look at the pictures, please? Can we talk to the people who were there? And the level of lies, that's really the painful thing. So I just wanted to talk about, so what's happening in Israel? What strikes you as being
I think so again, I think for 2 weeks right now, that once we're now in the war, I have really taken a stance not to say anything regarding how did we get here in the first place. I think it's time to really discuss this because we have 360,000 reservists who are mobilized. I have friends on the southern and northern border.
That's how I found out on Shabbat what was happening. We're sitting in shul, we're sitting in synagogue on Simchas Torah, and all of a sudden, a bunch of the younger guys are standing up and walking out. And really religious guys, and I'm like, oh, something is happening. These
right.
guys
You and I really didn't know the extent of what was happening because we don't use our phones.
Right.
We're not accessing
internet,
TV.
right.
Someone came into the shul and someone said, whoever is a reservist needs to get to their phone. Now, my son, who's in the Air Force, happened to be home for Shabbat, and he was just taking a rest. And I went back to my house and I said, you need to open up your phone. And he was called back to his base on Shabbat. And this is really weird for me because my son looked at me saying, turn on the phone. I said, something's happening. I don't know what it is, but we just got the message that they're asking the reservists, and you're an Air Force person now. I'm sure they're going to want you back. And I was right. And it happened to be a friend of the family came in and said that the Air Force is looking for him. He needs to go.
And the way I knew that it was really bad was I wanted to hear some news, and I wasn't going to turn on my phone or my computer, but there's a big park near my house where all the families go. It's a beautiful park, thank God. And I went out, and there were a lot of people there I didn't know who weren't from our town. And I was asking them, what's in the news? And they're like, well, actually, we're from Kiryat Shmona and Metula. We're from the other side of the north. And we came here on Shabbos to get away from it. And I'm like, wow. Oh, it's not just the South. People forget how small Israel is. I'm in this very protected corner, but yeah.
We were in Netanya. We're not near any of the missiles that were going over the southern border and the northern border, parts of the northern border. I thank God that there wasn't an attack from the north simultaneously with the south, to the extent that the south was doing, because this would have been a different situation. So I think we have to take in consideration that we're mobilizing over 500,000, at least 500,000 people. The military itself,
it was
along with the reservists.
150% of the reservists showed up, meaning they called up a bunch of guys, and a bunch of other guys said, "Me too. We want to go too."
But you have 360,000 right now.
That's actually the beautiful aspect, as you were talking about what led up to this. We were so divided, Israel. I've never seen it so divided. The protests, now we can see it was really silliness. And instantaneously, that all went away. All of it. We have a unity government, which go figure how that happens. Is we are so together. We are so unified. Thank God.
Right, but I think that's where the civilians came in. And I know you guys have been reporting on this, but what I've seen on the ground in a dysfunctional government trying to be unified, it took about
Right.
a week to get a unity government. Let's talk, call a spade a spade.
Right.
The government will be called for task for what happened on
Oh yeah.
October 7th, which
Oh
is
yeah.
our 9/11, which is, I want to say, is our 9/11. It's worse than the Yom Kippur War
And it
on
was
all
such
fronts.
a failure.
On
Like
all fronts, a failure of people who were sending out messages for help, 7 to 8 hours being left alone with no one coming.
unbelievable.
All of that will be tasked for this government to answer for. People have already, the IDF chief staff has already admitted to it, the failure. The finance minister, who I don't love that much, also said that he failed. Again, saying you failed, how we got here. And then the news breaking, not that long ago, there was a general who told about what was going to happen
Hmm.
in June, saying that this type of thing is going to happen. We know that Egypt warned Israel. We know that there was other warnings as well. So normally in the first 2 weeks, and I think everyone had this sense of it's not the time to criticize the government yet for what has been done. But now that we're 2 weeks in and we're still flip-flopping on whether we're going into Gaza or not, like full force,
You think
like it
so?
seems like we're sort of, yeah, I think so. I think this whole entire week, I think for, the president visiting sort of, delayed us going into Gaza. I
It
know we're
delayed us, but
tiptoeing
I
into,
think
again, I don't know, but when you have no direction from the government, what I've seen so far is the civilians taking charge,
yes.
making sure reserve units are getting what they need, whether it's food, socks, but I mean, there's no stock. I know this for personal experience. I want to buy something like a simple flashlight. I know a friend of a friend. It sounds like I'm a guy who's in a Walmart parking lot trying to find stock and something. It's crazy what's happening here inside of Israel. And that's why it's important to have the partnerships that we have around the world, because people are
Yeah.
willing to help and bring things in. But also, many people are not on a halat. People are not working, and instead of just sitting the news and watching the news, they're actually taking action and making sure that our people who are on the front lines are being taken care of. I think it's an amazing part of what I have seen on the ground. I've been dancing around missiles for the last 2 weeks trying to deliver stuff, but what we call chesed, the outpouring of loving kindness without ever trying to receive anything in back, just to do it for the sake of doing, because these people are defending us.
Every
And knowing
every
full well,
Israeli every Israeli got
yeah,
instructions to have 3 days worth of supplies and everything you needed to live in the bomb shelters for 3 days. And that's cutting it way close. You should have more. Can you imagine if you had to go? I mean, the supermarkets were empty, and like you said, flashlights. I'm sitting here. Oh, I remember I lost my Leatherman. I should have replaced it. All these basic things, it's really, what would you think about it if you have to go hide away in a bomb shelter for a week? Would you be able to do it like right now? All our stuff is in the bomb shelter waiting for us, in case we have to run. And that's the way we're living. And my son, my wife asked me, can he go to the park? I would rather not, because if the siren goes off, I don't want to have to go look for him. I want him right here. And I'm actually, like I said, I'm in a very safe place, but that's how we're living.
yeah,
So,
we're sort of living in uncertainty because we definitely don't have the instructions from the government to
right.
figure out what we're supposed to do. I mean, the government actually caused pandemonium last week when they said, "Okay, we're going to war. Now everyone needs to go and buy stuff from the supermarkets." Now, I don't know about you, Adam, but I went to the supermarket after delivering stuff to
It's
Sderot.
empty.
Okay,
It was
and
empty, right?
no, not it was like packed. I had to wait
No, but I
two
mean the
hours
shelves.
the shelves were empty. People were buying everything they could.
Yeah.
I had to wait 2 hours to check out. Again, when the government gives an instruction like that, you got to be careful not to cause what they did. That was just not the right thing to do. So I think people who are listening to this have to understand that somehow the civilians are in charge, which shouldn't be. It should be the government helping us. But I guess this is both of why we're libertarians, I think, Adam.
I
We don't
remember
put much trust in the
I spoke
government.
to Moshe Feiglin once about there was something I was writing about the Second Amendment in America, and he said Israel doesn't have the Second Amendment. I don't have the right to have a gun. And he said, you have a gun because the government gave it to you. And the government actually locked up a lot of the guns that were being used to protect the Southern communities. There was, what was the name? There was one woman. She was the only woman security, the person in charge of security of one kibbutz down south. And she got a message to be careful. And she's like, oh, I think something is bigger is happening. She unlocked the guns, gave them out, and it was the only community in the South where there was not a single person scratched. They were waiting. The terrorists showed up, they took them down. So that's also a thing the government just doesn't understand. I wanted to talk about something with you. I'm deeply concerned that I'm overreacting about this one point. It used to be that anytime you were talking about, even terrorist attacks in Israel, if you said, oh, it's the Holocaust, people would be like, can't compare it to the Holocaust. The Holocaust is the Holocaust. I have heard a lot of Israelis talking about the Holocaust. This was, the old Israelis. I love old Israelis. Old Israelis have lived through, it's more than history. It's prophecy. And I said, is this like 73? They're like, no. 73 was armies. This was not armies. This was civilians, individuals. And I've heard a lot, rather than comparing it to the 73 war, a lot of people are comparing it to the Holocaust.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing.
You've heard that?
Especially if you hear, I've heard the same thing, especially when you're hearing when they actually attacked that peace party near the Gaza border, there were people who lied under the dead bodies.
Yes. And that was
that's like a Holocaust-like episode of people hiding under the bodies to be able to live.
And
so
there was
the trauma of that. I can even give you more of a story.
There was another story about how they went into a bomb shelter where people were hiding and murdered everyone. And they were showing marks where the people's hands were on the wall and trying to get out. And that reminds me of the scratch marks on the walls of the gas chambers. I'm not the only one.
You're not the only one, and I could tell you that I know a story that of a friend of mine who knows a soldier who was so traumatically affected by Kibbutz Berry. Really, that was the massacre that happened at Kibbutz Berry. That when he came home, his clothes were all full of vomit, and he was not able to hold himself. The trauma just affected his entire body.
I can't even imagine it. Kibbutz Berry was, there was also Kibbutz Aza, and the music festival, and oh my gosh. And another thing that reminds me of that, if we can run with that, is I was watching the pro-Palestinian protests. And
in New York City, in Times Square,
everywhere.
But New York City, Square was,
Dearborn, Michigan, they had like 5,000 or 10,000 people. Paris, they made it illegal, and they still had these massive rallies. And I'm just like, there was a kind of mania that took over so many places in Europe, and especially Germany, but not just. The Jews are 0.3% of the population, but there's this mania, this fervor. We have to, kill the Jew, kill the Jew. And you'd think, we're 80 years after the Holocaust. Kill the Jew should be, it's you should laugh at it saying, are you serious? Are you really, is that what you are? And they're
Adam, I'm with you. I would have to say I grew up in New York, and I think there was just always around the corner, there's always a Holocaust type of mentality.
you think
Growing up
so?
in the late 70s, I grew up with this in the late 70s, early 80s. I in Brooklyn, New York. Somehow everyone hates us, and there's a Holocaust coming around the corner. That's what I was. Again, I grew up in a very insular borough park, Flatbush world. A lot of them are, families from survivors or survivors themselves. So you grew up with a sense of be careful. You can't be friendly with everybody. Just be with ourselves and, lay low because we were afraid of another Holocaust. And when you're growing up in that and you're looking at it, seems like Jews in America have been making it's pretty good for us. Everything seems to be fine. Everything seems to be great. And then if you look at the last 5 years,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
amplification of anti-Semitism to the level that you will actually have a rally at Times Square, right? The biggest concentration of Jews outside of Israel is New York City.
Right.
So, this is not Dearborn, Michigan. There is a Jewish community nearby, but we understand that there's a big Muslim community also there, and not all the Muslims are going to love the Jewish people. But in New York City, where you have a big concentration of the Jewish people, where you have all your Jewish organizations headquartered in Manhattan, and it's there that they're literally calling for the death of the Jews, then
Yeah.
you're like, oh, this looks like 1930s.
No one
But
has called for Hamas to stop firing rockets at Israel. No one has called for Hezbollah to stop firing rockets. And this really reveals, someone said this whole attack, it just ripped the mask off the
yeah,
lie.
the veil is now ripped off.
Right.
Yes.
This is what they would do if they could. And they really want to do even more. And they say it out loud. They've never hidden the ball. And it also ripped the lie off of, oh, I'm anti-Zionism, not anti-Semitic. I don't hate Jews. And well, we see that's a lie because now, what's that? Can you see me? Oh, did my okay? Anyway, um, now we see that that as soon as there's an issue with Israel, the Jews outside of Israel get attacked. It's not about Israel. It's about God's people. That's really what it is. And the lie is totally. And my friend, I got off the phone with him. This is a guy I grew up with, and I asked him. I said, dude, I'm like, you've seen the protests in Manhattan. You've seen the protests in Dearborn. He happens to be in New Jersey. I said, if it starts coming down your street, what are you going to do? I don't know. He doesn't know. He has no idea. He has no idea. Remember, we always say, oh, those silly German Jews who waited too long to get out of Germany. Well, too late. That's what we're looking at. And I thought I was the only one, but everyone's seeing it. They're not hiding the
Yeah.
ball.
No, I'm sharing. Listen, if you would have spoken to me 5 years ago, I said, Adam, you're insane. But the level of what I am seeing so far is crazy. I wouldn't will say this. I know this is going to be maybe the controversial statement, but pastors who don't call out evil now
Right.
is a problematic. In my interactions with Jews and Christians, obviously we are surrounded by people who love us, who put action to their words. But in greater Christianity, in a lot of the pulpits right now, it's like as if I don't want to get involved. All I want is peace. But what does peace mean? You have to define it from a biblical point of view. Peace doesn't mean to allow any support to terrorists whose whole intention, I'll say this for anyone who's hearing from the Christian side, hurting Jesus's family. And for someone to just say, I just want peace and everything should be lovey-dovey, and without taking a stance, in my eyes, in my humbleness right now, in having this conversation with you, is wrong. What you're saying, in essence, it's okay to kill Jesus's family because Jesus was Jewish. So what would this be looking like? It's funny sometimes in Christian thought is, what would Jesus do? It's just like, well, Jesus right now, if he was living, right, from what now, where would he be going? In a bomb shelter,
Yes.
right? So I'm just saying, from this thing where certain denominations are backing, being very pro-Palestinian right now. And again, the average Palestinian shouldn't be equated to Hamas. It's not the representation I'm saying, but not to denounce Hamas and not to denounce any of the missiles that are coming is just wrong.
Yeah,
Not to take a stance.
there's this thing about, oh, I don't want it to denounce. It's the victim mentality where they're like, oh, oh gosh, I remember I had this. I did the army with a Russian guy, and he was actually, I think he was like the ambassador to Uzbekistan. And at one point, he's like, "You Americans are crazy because you're so based in money that you naturally think, oh, rich people are rich because they're evil, and poor people are righteous because they're poor." And he said, "That's not true. That's not true." He said, "You have to call right and wrong for what they are. You have to call evil evil and righteousness righteousness. And just because a person is poor and oppressed doesn't mean they can't be evil. And if these people in Gaza, they're being given half a chance because they voted Hamas in, and the water and electricity are flowing freely in southern Gaza. Netanyahu did not say get out of Gaza. He said get out of northern Gaza. And no Arab nation has, they have all said quite explicitly and quite vocally, there's no Arab nation, there's no Arab country that's going to take in any people from Gaza, no refugees from Gaza, which is kind of really pretty horrifying.
It's
But
actually worse. It's actually very bad. It's like all of a sudden, like, okay, um, I'm not sure where Egypt is with this, but Egypt is the other side of that border with Gaza that can go ahead and help out with anything that has to deal with the refugee crisis, if there is one. But at the end of the day, Hamas is not letting anyone leave.
that's
Even if
also
there
true.
is a path, like, let's understand this. Yes, you need to get out of northern Gaza. Okay. If we're doing to go into Gaza, we're going in. We want to protect our soldiers. We wanted to protect civilians. The Israel Defensive Forces put out leaflets already announced, please leave, please leave. Anybody who's saying to stay is just like, what are you doing for your people?
And
They're telling you to go.
there's the Erez crossing where every day Palestinians came in to work in Israel from Gaza. And these very same Palestinians, and even Palestinians who live in Israel, in Judea and Samaria, were embedded within the terrorist groups. And there was a video of, after the murders at Kibbutz Be'eri, the Arabs from the surrounding villages went into Kibbutz Be'eri and started stealing from the dead people. And even now they're using their credit cards, and they were stealing everything. They were just walking out with everything, little 15-year-old boys. It's like, if you can't call out evil right now, then you're allied with evil. People can't be silent right now. There's no fence sitting. And Rav Pinchas Winston tells me that's how we know it's the sign before redemption, is because the whole purpose of Gog and Magog, of having, sides, a war, you have to pick a side. And he said, that's because Hashem wants to know where you are. And if these people in Gaza can't say, we denounce Hamas, or, I'm like, or, oh, there's a hostage over there, or, okay, you want to bomb my building, I'll get out, or don't bomb my building because the Hamas are hanging out two doors down. If they can't do that, well, where are they? They're really saying exactly who they support. And that's a problem. I think that's a problem. Anyway.
Adam, I think it's our time is almost up right now.
I,
We've been at this for over 50 minutes. This
have we
time
really?
flies. Yeah,
You know,
time
man,
flies when we're having these
it's,
type of
I mean,
discussions.
we're living, you know, I heard there's a Chinese curse, but I think everyone has it. You know, may you be cursed to live in interesting times. These are very interesting times, and I think this is the time that people have to stand up. And I don't know if I should be surprised, but it's amazing the people who are supporting Israel. And it's incredibly heartening in this incredible darkness. It's a tiny little light, a little Shabbos candle. It's a tiny little light that's really, it's the only light there is it's us crying out, Mila Hashem Alai, whoever's for Hashem, you know, stand with us. And it's amazing who's hearing the call. And it's disheartening to see the people who can't even denounce atrocities. Anyway, David, hopefully we'll have another talk next Motzei Shabbos about, wow, we thought it was going to be so bad. It's all over. Everything is wonderful. Everyone's home. Hopefully, God willing.
Hopefully, God willing. And we want to just thank all our listeners out there, really, who have been supporting Israel all this time. Continue prayers, please, because your prayers are protecting our people here.
Absolutely.
Right?
This week, a reminder, as David pointed out, this week is the week of whoever blesses us, we bless back in return. God said so, so he's got a dog in the fight. He's going to help us bless you back. Okay, David, thank you so much. Be blessed, y'all.